My name is Kurt Feyaert. I'm a linguistics professor at the University of Leuven in Belgium. I'm currently visiting professor at Feyaert in Venice. Yes, it absolutely is important. Definitely in these times of the pandemic. That's what you see everywhere, and there, my country isn't any different from other countries, I guess. You see, there is a huge need with people to express themselves beyond the ordinary, and poetry is showing up everywhere, in cities, on walls in the form of street art, but also regular, officially poems that are written on walls of shops, but also of private houses, cities, communities participating in this. It's not a movement, but this expression of this feeling people experience of expressing themselves. So yes, it's incredibly important. That's a tough one. I thought of, by the way, my country. Well, it's not that I want to express some political ideas with this, but as you may know, well, our country is divided in several parts according to linguistic identities. We have a French-speaking part, a Dutch-speaking part, and a small German-speaking part. And I live in the Dutch-speaking part, Flanders. So if I'm referring to Belgian poetry, actually I'm referring to Flemish poetry, because just for the reason that I'm not familiar with French poetry. So, but so that being said, speaking for Flemish poetry, my word that came to mind is struggle. Poetry has served a struggle in several ways, ways of humans, individuals, actually, the human mind struggling to free itself from all kinds of restrictive powers or institutions like militarism, church, hierarchies of all kinds. So I think, yeah, there is a linguistic issue. Flemish people having struggled quite heavily for their identity. That's just one part of it. But I mean, poetry serves this idea of freeing yourself, and in that way also, I think struggle might be a word to capture that.
Okay.
I'm going to narrow that question down to a time frame. So at this point in time, I mean, living my life in a pandemic, and exactly 100 years after this poem was published, I would like to name, or my favorite poem is Occupied City. That's the English translation of Bezette Stad, Occupied City by Paul van Ostaaije. It's a Flemish poem who lived in Antwerp during the First World War. Well, he didn't live that long. He lived from at the end of the 19th, at the beginning of the 20th century, and 1896 till 1928 to be exact. Well, he was living in Antwerp during the German occupation in the First World War, and the poem, it's actually a collection of poems, sort of a codex, of 32 poems which can all be read for themselves. And this title, Occupied City, really marks sort of the beginning of Dadaism, or some sort of expressionism in Belgium, in Flanders, really. And it's really a reaction against militarism, against war. So it's anti-war. It's an expression of longing for a new beginning. It's playing with font, with typography. You say that right? So, and it's really a visual, a nice visual experience if you look at it. So Paul van Ostaaije really was an avant-garde poet, satirist, revolutionary critic, and he opened up Flemish poetry to modern city life, really. And now myself, teaching a course on cities and global change, I feel very much linked to this type of poetry, but also from our experience today with the pandemic, where we're confined to a city and where our lives take a strange course, and where we also in a certain way long for a new beginning, right? Like, we all hope that this pandemic would be over and forgotten. uh, it's too easy of thinking it's just the same like the First World War, I know, but this idea of longing for a new beginning, that's something I recognize in this poetry. As such, it's a crazy work of rhythmical typography. As I said, it's an anti-war poem, really, attacking monarchism, militarism, and patriotism. That, of course, is an aspect which was typical for the beginning of the 20th century. But what I do like still in these days is what I just said about this longing for a new beginning, which we all experience. I guess, I hope. Being in Venice and thinking about the problems Venice has, in a way, not today, but in a way, when Venice is under normal circumstances, it also resembles an occupied city, occupied by tourists, right? So that also adds to my selection of this poem at this point in time of my life, being here at this point in time, really. So yeah, yes, being in Venice does play a role in my selection of this 100-year-old poem. I was also thinking of one word in trying to catch that, and the word, it's a preposition that comes to mind, and poetry means to me beyond, in the sense of looking beyond things or people or words, language, in the sense of realizing that there always is a second reading of things. Do not let slogans confine yourself. Do not run after slogans or books or just words. And the things do not just mean what you think they mean at first hand. So the richness of exploring, discovering, second reading, multiple readings, in not just words, in not just language, but also in ordinary objects, things that happen around you. And so that's what I feel when I say beyond the obvious. What is hiding in plain sight? That kind of reflection in itself. Yeah. So what gets back to you from looking at a small object or a word or a phrase, or a message on a shop window, whatever. That's poetry, being de-automatized in daily routine, where you sort of are halted and forced, well, not forced, but invited to reflect on, what am I? How do I read this? What do people mean by this? And in doing so, discovering multiple readings. Well, a second reading already is a nice thing. And I think it's a richness. This is something poetry can really teach us, where you do not just read it and immediately, oh yes, I get the meaning. I do not believe in the meaning. I mean, never. Yeah. Something we should try in throughout our lives. Not wait with judgments and look at things from different angles, and keep the perspective, keep different perspectives, and then come to a judgment or an evaluation. That's something which should happen more frequently, I think. So That's what I mean by beyond. Or I don't know if you can use it in isolation or in English, looking beyond or something.